The name Claire echoed in my mind as I stepped into my new apartment, the walls still smelling of fresh paint, the floors cold and bare. After a decade of relentless grinding, I finally had a place to call my own. A modest two-bedroom flat just a 15-minute drive from my office. I'm 34, single, and proud because I did this without shortcuts. It took years of patience, sacrifice, and sheer willpower. But this apartment is proof that my hard work paid off. I can still remember the first day I walked into my entry-level finance job. The salary barely covered rent, but I tightened my belt. Skipping fancy dinners and beach vacations, stacking my bank account instead of my Instagram. While my friends posted photos from Bali and Paris, I ate ramen at home, poring over spreadsheets late into the night. They didn't understand my obsession with saving. Claire, live a little, my best friend Mia would say, rolling her eyes whenever I turned down a spontaneous weekend trip or a designer bag. But I had a plan. A plan that finally led me to this apartment, a $260,000 slice of independence with a balcony that caught the morning sun just right. The final push came from my grandmother. She passed away 3 months ago, leaving me a modest inheritance. It wasn't much, but it was enough to bridge the gap between my savings and a down payment. She always believed in me, often telling me I was the only one in the family who truly understood the value of hard work. I still remember sitting in the lawyer's office, the smell of old leather and polished wood heavy in the air as he slid the papers across the desk. "She said you'd need it more than anyone else," he had said. His gaze sharp but sympathetic. With that inheritance and my decade of savings, I signed the papers, took the keys, and opened the door to this bare, echoing space. The walls were a bland off-white, the floors dusty from disuse, but to me it was a blank canvas. Over the next week, I scrubbed every corner, peeled off outdated wallpaper, and painted the walls a warm, soothing gray. At night, I'd sit on the floor, paintbrush in hand, sipping coffee and letting the sound of distant traffic remind me that I was finally where I wanted to be. Then, last Saturday, my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice crackled through the line, a mix of forced warmth and underlying tension. "Hey Claire, the whole family is coming over this weekend. You should come, it'll be nice to see everyone." I hesitated, the paintbrush pausing mid-stroke. I could already feel the tightness creeping into my chest. Family gatherings had always been minefields, a stage where I played the role of the serious, overworked, and slightly odd older daughter, while my sister Lily basked in the spotlight. She was the golden child, the one who dropped out of college to become an influencer, living off brand deals and sponsored vacations. The one my parents never hesitated to praise, even when her bills landed on their doorstep. But against my better judgment, I agreed. I told myself it was just dinner. I could handle a few hours of small talk and thinly veiled jabs about my boring life. After all, I had my own place now, a fortress no one could take away. The morning of the dinner, I parked in front of my parents' old house, the white paint peeling, the garden overgrown. It looked smaller than I remembered, as if the years had slowly shrunk it under the weight of broken promises and unspoken resentments. I took a deep breath and stepped out, the cool air biting at my skin. The door opened before I could knock, and there stood Lily. Her hair perfectly styled, her lips painted a shade of confident red. She squealed, pulling me into a tight hug that felt more like a performance than a greeting. "Claire, it's been ages. Is that the cake Mom asked you to bring?" I forced a smile, handing over the box. "Yeah, her favorite triple chocolate. Perfect," she sang, turning on her heel and disappearing into the kitchen, her voice trailing behind her. "Mom's going to be so happy." I stepped inside, the familiar smell of cinnamon and old wood washing over me. Voices echoed from the living room where my parents were already entertaining guests. I walked in, offering nods and tight smiles to aunts and uncles who barely glanced my way. My father gave me a brief, distracted hug before returning to his conversation with Uncle Mike, their voices low and conspiratorial. I was halfway to the kitchen when I heard my mother's voice ring out. "Claire, dear, put the cake on the dining table and come join us. We've got some exciting news." Exciting news! My stomach tightened, a reflex born from years of being blindsided by family announcements that usually meant more responsibilities for me and more applause for Lily. I set the cake down, peeled off my jacket, and braced myself. Whatever was coming, I needed to be ready. I had worked too hard for this small piece of freedom to let anyone threaten it. As I walked into the living room, my parents' eyes met mine, their smiles sharp and knowing. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a family dinner. It was an ambush. The living room buzzed with forced cheers as I stepped inside. My parents sat side by side on the worn-out couch, their eyes lighting up when they saw me, though. The warmth felt as thin as the threadbare rug beneath my feet. My mother, a petite woman with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun, waved me over. She had that tight-lipped smile she reserved for moments when she wanted to appear welcoming, but had a hidden agenda. "Claire, come sit," she said, patting the spot beside her. "We've missed you." I forced a smile, lowering myself onto the edge of the couch, careful to keep a polite distance. My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his thick hands clasped together as if he were about to break some monumental news. So my mother began exchanging a quick glance with my father. "We're so proud of how well you've been doing. Your new apartment, your career, you've really made something of yourself." My chest tightened. Compliments like these rarely came without strings attached. I braced myself, trying to keep my face neutral. "And it's got us thinking." She continued, her fingers twisting the pearl necklace she wore, a nervous habit I hadn't seen in years. "Lily and Ethan have been struggling a bit with their living situation. You know how expensive the city has become?" There it was, the catch. I felt my pulse quicken, the edges of my forced smile tightening. "They're actually expecting, Claire," my father chimed in, his voice tinged with a forced cheer. "Your sister is going to be a mother." I blinked, momentarily stunned. Lily. A mother. The image felt jarring, like trying to picture a cat in a business suit. She had always been the free spirit, the one with endless selfies and yoga retreat hashtags, not diaper bags and midnight feedings. That's surprising. I managed, forcing the words past the lump forming in my throat. "Yes, and they're hoping to save up for a place of their own." My mother continued, her tone slipping into that familiar coaxing note I remembered all too well from childhood. "But it's tough, you know. They need a little help getting back on their feet." I felt the room tilt slightly, my pulse throbbing in my ears. "Here it came. We were thinking," she said, leaning in as if this were some brilliant, generous idea, "since you have that nice, spacious apartment all to yourself. Maybe they could stay with you for a little while, just until the baby is born and they get back on their feet." I swallowed, my throat dry as sandpaper. My mind raced through the years of sacrifices I had made to afford that apartment. The missed parties. The countless bowls of instant noodles. The 12-hour workdays that left me too exhausted to even think about dating. "I appreciate that you want to help them," I said, my voice a bit more strained than I intended, "but my apartment is my space. I've worked really hard for it." My mother's eyes tightened, the corners of her mouth twitching in a faint, disapproving frown. "Of course, dear, but they're family. And family helps each other, right? Family." That word twisted in my gut, a sharp, jagged edge slicing through my resolve. "Claire, think about it." My father added, his tone a mix of encouragement and expectation. "You're single with a steady job. You don't really need all that space, do you?" I felt my jaw clench, the muscles tight and rigid. The room felt smaller, the walls inching closer as the pressure of their expectations pressed in. "Look," I said, my voice firmer this time. "I get that they're in a tough spot, but I'm not looking to become someone's landlord. I've just started building my own life, and I need that space for myself." For a brief, blessed moment, the room fell silent. The only sound, the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Then my mother sighed, her shoulders sagging in exaggerated disappointment. "I just thought," she said, her voice dropping to a softer, guilt-laden tone, "that after all we've done for you, you'd want to give back a little." I felt the breath leave my lungs, the sting of those words hitting harder than I expected. She had perfected the art of emotional blackmail, wielding it like a well-honed blade. But I wouldn't back down. Not this time. "I need to think about it," I replied, forcing my tone to remain steady. "This isn't a small favor. It's my home." My father exhaled sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Fine, think about it. But remember, family is supposed to support each other. Don't let that new apartment turn you into a stranger." I stood the room, tilting once more as I forced myself to keep my head high. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, my voice cool, my heart pounding. I turned and walked back toward the kitchen, the air in the living room thick with unspoken tension. I grabbed my coat, slipping it on with shaky hands. As I reached for the door, I heard my sister's voice drift in from the kitchen, sharp and mocking. "She'll come around, Mom. She always does." I paused, my hand on the doorknob, my pulse roaring in my ears. The old Claire might have, the one who craved approval and sought validation from people who only saw her as a backup plan. But that Claire was gone. I stepped outside, letting the door swing shut behind me, the cool evening air washing over my flushed cheeks. I would not become a stranger in my own life just to make them comfortable. As I drove away, the headlights slicing through the darkness, I felt something harden within me. They had underestimated me. They still thought I was the same girl who would bend over backward just to feel included. But they were about to find out just how wrong they were. The next morning, I woke to the soft glow of the rising sun filtering through my bedroom blinds. I stretched, letting the warmth seep into my muscles as I rolled out of bed. My apartment. My sanctuary felt different today, less like a blank canvas and more like a fortress. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, the cool tiles soothing against my skin as I poured myself a cup of strong dark coffee. As I leaned against the counter staring out at the city skyline, my mind replayed yesterday's conversation with my parents. Their words still echoed in my head, each one a tiny pinprick against my carefully built armor. Family helps each other. You're single, you don't really need all that space. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound cutting through the morning stillness. It wasn't just the request that stung, but the presumption behind it that my life, my sacrifices, my hard-won freedom were somehow less valuable because I wasn't married or expecting a child. As if my worth was measured solely by my proximity to motherhood or my willingness to serve as a backup plan for my sister's impulsive decisions. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness ground me. I had to set boundaries. I had to make it clear that I wasn't a doormat, as a fallback option, or a silent investor in my sister's chaotic lifestyle. My phone buzzed on the counter, the screen flashing with a familiar name, Mia. I hadn't talked to her since the move, too caught up in the whirlwind of unpacking and painting to keep up with my social life. I picked up the phone, her bright, slightly raspy voice spilling through the speaker the second I hit answer. Claire, how's the new place? Have you finally thrown out that hideous futon, or is it still holding your living room hostage? I chuckled, the tension in my shoulders easing just a fraction. Hey, Mia. It's amazing, actually. And no, the futon is still here, but it's on thin ice. Good to hear. You should host a housewarming party soon. Let me know if you need help planning. I've got a Pinterest board full of urban chic ideas, just waiting for an excuse to shine. I hesitated, my mind flashing back to my parents' living room, to the tight smiles and expectant glances. Actually, I might need your help with something else. Oh, spill. I took a deep breath, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. My parents want Lily and Ethan to move in with me just for a few months until they get back on their feet. There was a long, pregnant pause on the other end of the line, the kind that makes your heart race a little faster. Wait. What? Mia's tone dropped from playful to serious in a heartbeat. They want you to let your sister and her freeloading boyfriend crash at your place. Are they out of their minds? I let out a dry chuckle, rubbing a hand over my face. Apparently not. They hit me with the full guilt trip yesterday. Family helps each other. You've got all that space. They're expecting a baby. The whole 9 yards. Mia groaned, the sound of her pacing coming through the line. Claire. No. Just no. You've worked too hard for this place. You deserve to enjoy it without turning it into a crash pad for your sister's next Instagram project. Don't let them bully you into this. I know? I said, my voice firmer now, the knot in my chest loosening just a bit, but you know how my family is. They won't take no for an answer, and if I push back too hard, I'll become the villain in their narrative. Let them. Mia snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. You've always been the responsible one, the one who sacrifices. It's their turn to deal with their own mess for once. You don't owe them your peace of mind. I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. She was right. I had spent years putting others before myself, bending over backward to be the good daughter, the reliable sister. But this was different. This was my home, my sanctuary. I couldn't let them bulldoze their way into it just because they were family. Thanks, Mia, I said. My voice steadier now. I needed to hear that. Anytime, babe. And if they keep pushing, just remind them that you're not their safety net. You're not their backup plan. I hung up feeling a little lighter, a little more in control. But as I set my phone down, another message popped up on the screen. A group text from my mother. Mom, family dinner next Sunday. We have some big news to share. Make sure you're there. I stared at the message, my jaw clenching. Of course, another family dinner, another round of emotional arm twisting. I set my coffee cup down a little harder than necessary, the ceramic clinking against the granite countertop. If they thought they could corner me into becoming my sister's unpaid landlord, they had another thing coming. I glanced around my apartment, the morning light casting long, soft shadows across the freshly painted walls. This was my space. I had fought for it, bled for it, sacrificed for it, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. I would go to that dinner. I would sit through their thinly veiled manipulation and their guilt-laden speeches, but I wouldn't bend. Not this time. No more sacrificing my peace for their convenience. No more playing the role of the dutiful daughter. I was done being their backup plan. The following Sunday, I found myself gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly as I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house looked the same as always. Faded white siding, a creaky front porch, the flower beds choked with weeds. It felt more like a museum of my childhood than a home, each creaking floorboard and chipped window frame, a relic of memories I had long since buried. I cut the engine, the sudden silence in the car making my heartbeat seem louder. I took a deep breath, staring at the old swing set in the front yard, its once bright red paint now flaking off in rusty curls. This house had always felt like a place where dreams came to die. And today, I could almost hear the whispers of long-forgotten arguments and broken promises seeping from the walls. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed the bottle of wine I had picked up as a peace offering and stepped out into the cool afternoon air. The front door swung open before I reached the steps, and my mother's face appeared framed in the doorway, her eyes lighting up in a forced, performative kind of joy. "Claire, you made it?" She stepped forward, wrapping me in a tight hug that felt more like a restraint than a greeting. Her floral perfume clung to my clothes as she pulled back her hand, still gripping my shoulders like she was afraid I might bolt. Come in, come in. Everyone's already here." I forced a smile, the weight of her expectations settling onto my shoulders like a wet blanket. As I stepped inside, the familiar hum of family chatter washed over me, the air thick with the smells of roasted meat and garlic. The living room was packed, every available chair and couch cushion, claimed by a relative. Lily and Ethan sat on the couch, their fingers intertwined like lovesick teenagers. Ethan, with his shaggy hair and 2 white sneakers, offered me a quick nod, his eyes darting away as if he couldn't bear to make actual conversation. "Claire, over here," my father called, waving me toward the kitchen where a cluster of aunts and uncles had gathered around the island, their drinks clinking as they laughed at some inside joke I had long since stopped trying to understand. I pasted on another tight smile and made my way over, slipping the bottle of wine onto the counter. My mother followed close behind her hand, lightly touching my arm as if to guide me into place. "Let me get you a glass," she said, already reaching for the bottle. "You must be thirsty after the drive." "Thanks," I replied, leaning against the counter, my eyes drifting over to the dining room where the table was already set, the good china laid out with the precision of a military parade. I noted the extra place settings, my stomach tightening. This wasn't just a casual family dinner. They had a plan. As if reading my mind, my father clinked his glass to grab everyone's attention. The room quieted, heads turning toward him, the buzz of conversation fading into expectant silence. He cleared his throat, casting a glance at my mother, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. "Well, now that everyone's here," he began, his deep, gravelly voice carrying easily through the room, "we have some wonderful news to share." I felt my spine stiffen, every nerve on high alert. "Here it comes. Lily and Ethan have some exciting news." He continued, his eyes landing on my sister, who gave a little bashful smile, leaning into Ethan's shoulder like a high school girl announcing her prom date. "We're pregnant," she squealed, holding up her left hand, a modest diamond ring catching the light. "And we're engaged." The room erupted into cheers and clinking glasses, my mother's hands flying to her mouth in a perfect imitation of surprise. My father pulled Ethan into a bear hug, clapping him on the back like a long-lost son, while the aunts crowded around Lily, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of congratulations. I forced myself to clap, my palms stinging, as I joined the chorus of forced enthusiasm. I tried to catch my breath, the walls of the old house feeling suddenly closer, the air thinner. My mother's arm snaked around my waist, pulling me in for a side hug. "Isn't this wonderful, Claire?" she whispered, her voice tinged with a satisfaction that made my skin crawl. A new beginning for our family. I managed a tight nod, my mind spinning with the implications. An engagement. A baby. They weren't just asking for a temporary place to crash, they were looking for a long-term solution. Family photo time, someone called from the living room, and I felt myself being dragged toward the couch, my mother's grip on my arm firm and unyielding. As we crowded together, the smell of my uncle's aftershave and my aunt's overpowering floral perfume mingling in the close quarters, I caught Lily's eye. She gave me a small, conspiratorial smile, her eyes gleaming with unspoken triumph. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. The trap they had set, the invisible web of obligations and expectations tightening around me. They wanted me to become the safety net, the reliable older sister who would sacrifice her freedom for the sake of family just as I had always done. But this time, they had underestimated me. As the camera flashed, capturing my forced smile and my sister's smug grin, I made a silent vow I would not let them guilt me into this. I would not let them turn my hard-won freedom into their safety net. They might have the ring, the baby, and the spotlight tonight, but I still had one thing. They hadn't counted on my resolve. I would not be their backup plan. The days following the engagement announcement were oddly quiet. My parents didn't call, and Lily didn't send her usual stream of heart emojis and Instagram-worthy selfies. I should have felt relieved, but the silence felt like the calm before a storm. I knew my family too well. They were plotting, calculating, waiting for the right moment to corner me. That moment came a week later. On a gray, rainy Saturday, I had just returned from a morning run, my damp hair clinging to my face as I fumbled with my apartment keys. The sound of distant thunder rumbling through the overcast sky. As I pushed the door open, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I tossed my keys into the bowl by the door and grabbed my phone, my pulse spiking when I saw my mother's name on the screen. Mom. Hey, sweetheart. Can you come over for dinner tomorrow? We have some things to discuss. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I could already picture the scene, the dining room lit with flickering candles. My mother's best tablecloth laid out like a trap. My father's stern but hopeful eyes. Watching me across the table, I let out a long, slow breath, mentally bracing myself for the ambush. Me, sure, what time? Her response came almost immediately. Mom, 5 p.m. and bring that nice wine you like. It'll be a celebration. I set my phone down, staring at the rain streaking down the window, my mind racing. What exactly were we celebrating, and why did I have a sinking feeling that whatever it was, it would come at my expense? The next day, I arrived at my parents' house a few minutes before 5, my hands gripping the bottle of wine like a lifeline. The front door swung open before I even reached the steps, and my mother appeared. Her face lighting up in that strained, too bright smile that told me everything I needed to know. She was nervous. Claire, come in, she gushed. Stepping aside to let me pass, I caught the faintest whiff of her floral perfume as she pulled me into a quick, stiff hug. We're so glad you could make it. I forced a smile, stepping into the house, my senses immediately assaulted by the familiar sense of rosemary, garlic, and roasting meat. The living room buzzed with quiet conversation, the air thick with anticipation. I glanced around, noting the neatly arranged throw pillows, the fresh flowers on the side tables, the faint strains of classical music drifting from the old stereo. They had gone all out. I stepped into the dining room, my eyes quickly taking in the table set for 6. My father was already seated at the head, his face creased into a tight, unreadable expression. Lily and Ethan sat side by side, their hands entwined, the modest diamond on Lily's finger catching the warm glow of the chandelier. Ethan gave me a quick nod, his face flushed, a nervous energy radiating off him. Claire, Lily, chirped, her eyes sparkling as she leaned in to air kiss my cheek. So glad you could make it. This is going to be such a special night. I bit back a retort, my jaw tightening as I took my seat opposite them. My mother bustled in behind me, setting the wine down in the center of the table with a flourish. She poured the glasses herself, the dark liquid swirling in the crystal like a silent promise. Let's toast. My father, said, his voice booming over the clink of glasses, to family. I forced my glass up the rim, cool against my lips, as I took a long, deliberate sip. The wine was smooth, rich, but it tasted bitter on my tongue. The small talk that followed felt like walking through a minefield, each question and comment carefully crafted to steer the conversation toward their real agenda. I felt it building, the tension thickening, like the gathering storm outside, the air around us crackling with unspoken words. Finally, my mother cleared her throat, folding her hands neatly on the table as she met my eyes. Claire, we've been talking. She began, her tone carefully measured, about the future, about how we as a family can support each other in the coming months. My pulse quickened, my fingers tightening around the stem of my wine glass. And we've realized, she continued, her eyes flicking to my father for support, that with Lily expecting and Ethan's job situation being well unpredictable, they could really use a stable place to stay. My heart sank. There it was, the pitch. We know it's a lot to ask, my father added, his voice lower now, almost pleading. But you have that beautiful, spacious apartment. It would only be for a few months, just until they get back on their feet. Lily leaned forward. her eyes wide, her lower lip quivering like she was about to burst into tears. "Claire, I know you've worked so hard for that place, and I'm so proud of you. But this baby, it changes everything. We just need a little help, a little support, you understand, don't you?" I felt my chest tighten, my mind racing with 1,000 angry retorts. I thought of my quiet mornings on the balcony, my long, peaceful evenings with a book and a glass of wine, my hard-won independence. I thought of the countless sacrifices I had made to buy that apartment, the years I had spent grinding through spreadsheets and late nights to escape the shadow of this very house. I set my glass down, the soft clink echoing through the suddenly silent room. "I understand," I said slowly, meeting each of their eyes in turn, "but my answer is no." The room froze, my mother's smile faltering, my father's jaw tightening, Ethan's eyes darting to the floor. Lily's mouth fell open, her perfectly lined lips forming a small shocked, "Oh, no?" My mother repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. "Claire, this isn't just about you. This is about family. About helping each other." I forced myself to take a slow, calming breath, the air feeling sharp and cold in my lungs. "And I have helped," I replied, my voice steadier now, each word clear and deliberate. "I have always helped, but this is my space, my home. I earned it, and I won't give it up just because you've decided it's convenient." Silence fell over the table, the air crackling with the tension of a dozen unspoken accusations. I watched as my mother's face twisted, her eyes, narrowing, her cheeks flushing a deep, angry red. "Well?" She snapped, her voice low and dangerous. "I hope you don't regret this, Claire, because family doesn't forget." I met her gaze, my own heart thundering in my chest, my fingers trembling slightly against the polished wood of the table. "Neither do I." The silence that followed my refusal clung to the air like the sharp, lingering scent of burnt toast. My mother's eyes had gone cold, her mouth a thin, bloodless line as she pushed back from the table. My father sat rigid, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle ticking beneath his stubbled cheek. Across from me, Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his hand slipping from Lily's, his gaze fixed firmly on the polished wood of the dining table, as if it held the answer to this sudden fracture in our family's carefully constructed facade. Lily, on the other hand, recovered first. She took a sharp breath, her chest rising like a drawn blade, and fixed me with a wounded, teary-eyed stare. "I can't believe you," she whispered. Her voice trembling, though I could see the sharpness in her eyes. "After everything we've been through together, after all the support I've given you." I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat, but I swallowed it down, my nails digging into my palms beneath the table. Support. The only thing Lily had ever supported was her own lifestyle, riding the waves of my parents' coddling, while I scrimped and saved for years. "I have supported you, Lily," I replied, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "I've supported this family in ways you can't even imagine. But I'm done sacrificing my peace, my home, for someone who only remembers my name when she needs something." Lily's face crumpled, the carefully crafted mask of the doting sister slipping to reveal something harder, meaner. "So that's it." Then she snapped, her voice rising, cutting through the heavy silence like a whip crack. "You're just going to let your niece or nephew be born homeless? You're really that selfish?" My jaw tightened, a wave of hot, simmering anger rising in my chest. This was the game they always played, turning every boundary. I tried to set into a moral failing, a sign that I was somehow the broken one for refusing to bend. "No?" I said, leaning forward, my hands flat on the table, the cool wood grounding me. "I'm not selfish for protecting the life I've worked so hard to build. I'm not selfish for refusing to be your safety net. I'm just done." My mother's chair scraped against the tile as she stood, her hands shaking slightly as she pointed a trembling finger at me. "You ungrateful child," she hissed, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. "After everything we've done for you, the sacrifices we've made, the years we spent raising you, you would really choose to turn your back on your family for a few square feet of floor space?" I met her gaze, my own hands trembling slightly, my heart pounding against my ribs. "This isn't about floor space," I shot back, my voice cracking with the force of long-suppressed anger. "This is about respect, about boundaries, about not being the backup plan every time Lily makes a mess of her life." My father slammed his fist down on the table, the dishes rattling with the force of it. "Watch your tone, young lady," he growled, his eyes flashing. "You don't speak to your mother like that." I felt a cold, bitter calm settle over me, my pulse slowing as the anger burned itself down to embers. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I won't watch my tone. Not anymore. For a long, breathless moment, the only sound in the room was the faint ticking of the wall clock, each second stretching into eternity. I could feel their eyes on me, 1,000 unspoken accusations hanging in the air like smoke. Finally, my mother dropped her hand, her shoulders sagging, her eyes filling with a mixture of anger and something that almost looked like fear. "Well," she said, her voice brittle and cold, "I hope you're prepared to live with the consequences of this decision." I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping against the tile as I rose, my knees trembling slightly but my spine straight. I said, grabbing my coat from the back of the chair. "I'm prepared to live with my choices. I just hope you are too." I turned and strode toward the door, my footsteps ringing against the cold tile floor, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. As I reached the door, I heard Lily's voice behind me, sharp and cutting, her words dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, Claire. You'll regret turning your back on us." I paused, my hand on the doorknob, the cold metal cool against my palm. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words wash over me, my mind replaying 1,000 small betrayals, 1,000 quiet sacrifices. "No?" I said, my voice steady, my heart strangely light. "I think for the first time I won't." And then I walked out the door, clicking shut behind me, with a finality that felt both terrifying and liberating. The drive back to my apartment felt surreal, the city lights blurring past my window as rain began to patter against the glass. I felt hollow, like I had left a piece of myself behind in that cramped dining room. But I also felt free, like I had finally shed a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. When I reached my apartment, I dropped my keys onto the small table by the door, my hands still shaking, my pulse still thrumming in my ears. I kicked off my shoes, shrugged off my coat, and sank onto the couch, my eyes stinging with unshed tears. I had done it. I had finally drawn a line in the sand. I had said no. I took a deep breath, the air cool and clean, free from the suffocating weight of unspoken expectations and emotional blackmail. I had my apartment, my sanctuary, my peace, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. Not now, not ever. I closed my eyes, leaning back into the soft cushions, letting the rain on the window lull me into a rare, dreamless sleep. The storm outside, a fitting soundtrack to the storm I had just walked through. Story 2. Violet is my name. My age is 36, is holding the position of Chief Strategy Officer for a Seattle-based financial company. However, I've always been the underdog in my family's view. They have a family reunion in Monterey Bay's old estate every June. The area where I lived up was once my childhood paradise before it became to represent isolation. It was the same this year. At precisely 9 a.m., the email arrived Monday. All capitals for the subject line. "Remember the summertime Spencer family get-together in Monterey? Whomever sent it. Erin, my oldest sister." The whole family seemed excited to be together, and the tone was positive and joyful. However, I was aware I was only a name to cover the void. Why am I so certain? Because I haven't had a decent place to sleep for the last 7 years. "Violet, the rooms are full. Get a hotel close by, perhaps." That's my mom. Helen's famous quote, similar to clockwork. It doesn't miss a beat year after year. My assistant Julia came in with 2 espressos as I was sitting in my office on the 28th floor gazing at that email. "Another family get-together?" Observing my gloomy face, she questioned. I gave a nod. "I'll guess. Again this year, there are not enough accommodations." I let out a quick, dry laugh. "Perhaps Erin's daughter needs more room to make art this time." I knew what was going to happen next without ever hearing it. Mom would call that night as usual, although she used conditional wording. Her voice was as sweet as honey. "Lovely. Violet, I simply don't want you to feel awkward. They're renovating the roof. Lily wants a peaceful area in which to paint." You get it. I would often pretend to smile and end the call each year. Not this year, though. I took a quick look at the letter on my desk. The one who appointed me executive vice president for the whole Northwest, a position I had been striving for over 10 years, without slowing down to overcome intense competition. They were unaware and most likely didn't give a damn. Everything started to change the summer. I was 11 years old. Violet, proceed to wash the dishes. Erin and Mom need to prepare for the reception. In the meantime, Dad let my brother Alex sit outdoors and teach him how to throw a party. With soap bubbles on my hands and my chest tense, I stood in the hot kitchen while listening to laughter reverberating from the porch. Support was the only term that described my function in the family after that. Nobody inquired about my desires. I was only the backdrop to their show. The bright Alex, the driven Aaron in me. I wasn't noteworthy enough to get noticed, but I was good enough to avoid reprimands. My closest friend from high school, Olivia, who is currently the creative director of a Chicago furniture company, buzzed me on the phone. "Monterey once more. Do you want wine sent in an emergency?" I answered. "Alternatively, send me a one-way ticket out of this family tree." Then the phone rang once again and it was Mom calling. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because I already knew what she'd say, a fake invitation hiding the same old trap. I looked out the window. The city of Seattle glowing in silver. Dusk I had built an entire life. They never bothered to ask about. But now something felt different inside. Not pain, not resentment, just a quiet, steely thought. The day I received the official letter from the board confirming I would be promoted to regional CEO for the Northwest. Starting July 1st. Aaron posted a photo from their pre-reunion picnic. The whole family eating fruit pies by the beach? My mother commented under it. Family is everything. I wasn't in that photo as always. I once believed that success would make them see me differently. I worked relentlessly, graduated top of my class from Cornell, earned a full scholarship for my MBA at Wharton, worked at 3 major investment firms before joining Brockwell Capital and climbing to my current role. I thought if I become good enough, they can't ignore me. But I was wrong. Not long ago at Mom's 70th birthday party held at a luxury Italian restaurant in San Francisco, I flew in from Chicago where I was attending a national strategy conference. I arrived on time wearing a tailored gray silk dress, holding a carefully wrapped cashmere scarf I'd selected in Florence. As I entered, Mom looked at me and said, "Oh, Violet, you made it. I thought you'd be too busy." Before I could set the gift down, she turned and embraced Aaron. "My darling girl. That dress matches your eyes beautifully." I stood there, surrounded by crystal glasses and chandeliers, feeling like I had just walked into a room where I was never truly invited. The tipping point came when Alex, my brother, who's gone bankrupt 3 times chasing big tech startups, stood up and gave a speech that had the whole family clapping wildly. We must always believe in each other. Like Mom always believed in me through all my ventures. Mom nodded tearfully while Dad clinked glasses with Uncle Stan, like they'd just heard a legendary CEO speak. No one asked what I did, no one mentioned the multi-million-dollar deals I was managing, not a single word about me, as if I didn't exist. Like I sat silently forcing down cold pasta while Mom recounted Aaron's childhood fashion sense. She could color match dresses at 5 years old. Such natural taste, I had redesigned Brockwell Capital's entire office and won an award for corporate interior design. But to Mom, that wasn't worth mentioning compared to a child's pink dress. A few days later, I offered to help finance repairs for the Monterey house. The front roof had been covered in moss for over a year, and Mom coolly replied, "Oh, Aaron and her husband got it. They're planning something. You're always so busy, I didn't want to bother you, Father." I went quiet. That estate was where I learned to swim, where I read my first novels on the porch bench, where I once dreamed I'd get married someday. Now I was a stranger in my own childhood home. Olivia, the only friend who'd stuck with me all these years, had once said during dinner, "You're not the failure in that family. They just can't handle the fact that the one they underestimated became the most successful." I smiled, but didn't argue because deep down I knew she was right. That night I stayed up until 3 a.m. in my penthouse apartment, gazing at the glittering Seattle skyline. I opened my laptop, logged into a real estate platform specializing in California vacation homes, the beachside estate. My family's old house had been quietly listed 3 weeks ago and no one told me. I knew why. They didn't think I had any reason to care, or worse, they thought I couldn't afford it. I took a screenshot, texted Olivia. It's time for the final move. Not for revenge. To reclaim what should have been mine all along. And this time, they wouldn't be able to pretend I didn't exist. 2 weeks after my mom's birthday party, I got the final reminder email about this year's family reunion. Aaron again still pretending to be all bubbly and close. "Hey fam, don't forget second weekend of June. If you arrive early, help set up the BBQ tent." I scanned the attached list. Everyone had their own room. Aaron and her husband in the upstairs suite, Alex and his new girlfriend took the west wing. Even the kids had a designated area and me. Not a word. Not to mention just one faint note at the bottom. "Violet, if attending, may want to book an Airbnb nearby. We're at full capacity. Hope that's okay?" I closed the laptop. sat back in my chair. Not furious, not sad. I expected it, but this time, instead of feeling excluded, it was like something snapped inside me. That nightfall, as the city grew quiet, I relaunched the real estate webpage sorted by Monterey vacation houses. The estate emerged at the top, its front decaying roof tiles discolored. Note saying requires renovation. Price lowered 20% from previous year. I clicked transaction history. The residence had been refinanced 2 years previously. The loan sum was rarely impacted. That's why they were anxious to sell. My family, constantly boasting about tradition and family values, was trying to preserve appearances by arranging a reunion in a property about to be repossessed. I sighed. As a youngster, that house had seemed like my sole secure haven. But with every year, every dinner, I was excluded from every folding chair I was put into. Every photo I was kept out of that home became a symbol of rejection. Now, I could convert it into proof that I was never the one left behind. I phoned Laura, my attorney and financial counselor. First thing the next morning. "You want to purchase it?" Laura inquired, astonished. "Under your actual name," I grinned. "No use the holding company we put up last year. Violet doesn't need to show up anywhere." Nicely done. She chuckled. "I'll get things started. Keep it a secret from your family. I've never spoken to them, not even when I became a Forbes star." "No reason to start now," I said. Everything went nicely after 3 weeks. As long as the money arrived quickly, the seller, a bank representative, didn't inquire. From my office in Seattle, I signed the deal. As the pen lifted from the last page, my coffee was still hot on the table. Laura gave me a glance. "The Spencer estate in Monterey Bay is now legally yours." "Well done." I held the new key tightly. Tiny chili sharp? However, it stood for everything I had merited. Not restoration of vengeance, I kept it a secret. Not Julia, not Remy, nor Olivia. My closest coworker. I just planned a 3-day vacation to fall on the weekend of the reunion. 3 days early on Thursday morning, I arrived in Monterey. My Hermes bag and a bulky portfolio bearing the Hanzi Corporation emblem were in the passenger seat. A few hours before, I had completed a merger with a fintech startup. Despite ending quietly, the $400 million Hensley Brooks sale caused a ripple across the investing community. In discussions, I was also in charge of strategy. Not only did I deliver, but I was also chosen for the role of worldwide vice president. When the merger was officially announced the following month, I was looking forward to a new executive job in Singapore. I kept it a secret from my family. They didn't give a damn. I've always been Violet to them, the reserved, aloof person who never shows up for reunions. Prior to this, I believed that being chief strategy officer was the pinnacle. This was the pivotal moment. The board's offer letter was sent to me via email. The subject line was just plain text. "You deserve this. So congratulations." And I started crying for the first time in years. That day when I sat on the balcony of the estate that now officially belonged to me. The salt of old memories carried by the ocean air. I felt noticed and acknowledged, not because of the title or the bonus. Olivia gave a call. She had just finished launching her autumn furniture line when she arrived in Chicago. The financial report was recently read by me. "You did it really?" "Yes," I said coolly. "I was chosen." "You don't understand, Violet. The Wall Street Review's business section features you on the top page. The story about you has been shared all over my LinkedIn feed." Still staring at the sunset, I gave a little grin. "I'm aware, but it's unlikely that my family has seen it." Believe me, Aaron is most likely furious someplace trying to understand why Aaron will claim that it's merely someone with the same name. But Violet Spencer is now the youngest female executive ever promoted at Brook. Alex most likely believes it to be a fake. As I stated dryly, "Have they arrived yet?" I checked the time, and I will be present to greet them tomorrow morning. Remember to record their responses. You are deserving of every moment of this oddly calm. I ended the call. I used to hope they would approve of me. I sent cards for every holiday. I was hoping a family member would call and clarify. "You have our admiration." Now, however, the truth is in print, that was no longer necessary for me. The National Financial Program at 8A. The next day included film of me shaking hands with the hands in a deep blue suit for about 2 minutes on the Brook Well Hands transaction. Violet Spencer, the woman behind the billion-dollar deal that changed the market, was captioned as the CEO appeared on screen. My phone then exploded. Mom sent the first message. Mom, was that you, my love? I recently watched the news. I didn't respond. Aaron followed. Congratulations if it's true, but the media always loves to exaggerate. I locked the screen without a word. Alex then requires an advisor for startups. I have some concepts. Perhaps we can work together. I laughed with amusement, not resentment. They have been ignoring me all my life, and now they are rushing back because of one financial segment. No regrets, no recognition of the past, only opportunistic optimism. I surveyed the house. I had a design team coming in the following week, but the walls were still the same color. This would no longer be a home of peaceful recollections. It would serve as a tribute to the silent power they consistently disregarded. I got up and went into the living room where I took out the HR travel dossier sent that morning. The plan to relocate to Singapore was included. A new team was waiting for my leadership, and a penthouse in Marina Bay was waiting for my tour. I had unresolved business first. Though the following morning my family would arrive, they continued to believe that they were entering their home as they had each year. They didn't know. It would be me who would show them, with the truth, not with words. They were unable to ignore it. As I poured coffee in the same kitchen where I had eaten breakfast as a child, the sound of tires on gravel reverberated through the front gate. I watched through the window as Mom's SUV, Aaron's and Alex's cars pulled up. As if nothing had changed, they went outside to talk and laugh, as if they were still living here. I put down my mug and entered the living room slowly. There was a sharp click of heels on the wood floor. The doors won't open. From outside came Mom's voice, perplexed. Have you got your key? Aaron? Aaron inserted the key and said, Of course, Mom. Click, click. Nothing. Alex made a subsequent attempt. No luck yet. I opened the door from the inside, hand firm on the knob, and pulled it open gently. The three of them turned, stunned, like I just stepped out of the wrong universe. Violet. Mom squinted. What are you doing here? I tilted my head slightly, smiling. Welcome to the Monterey estate. Please come in. I stood aside, my voice mild as sea wind, yet harsh as steel. Aaron came forward, eyes apprehensive. Wait a second. Mom tried the key twice and it didn't work. How did you get in? Who handed you a key? I didn't answer immediately away. Instead, I proceeded into the living room where I had spread out a huge folder carrying the Reverend's hotel emblem, a 5-star resort approximately 10 minutes away. On top were labeled envelopes for each family member, each with a golden room keycard. There is something you should probably know. I turned to face Mom immediately. This residence no longer belongs to the family. Silence. I was clear in my speech. I purchased the estate through my private holding company more than a month ago. From now on, the legal owner must provide permission for anything to happen at this residence, even reunions. I glanced at each of them, maintaining the courteous grin that was more piercing than an insult. The first to respond was Alex. Wait a moment. You mean you purchased this property with what you pay? No, with executive rights and stock from the transaction I recently oversaw. Worth more than $400 million, I unlocked my iPad and retrieved the news article about my trembling hands. The CEO. Perhaps you would know if you paid more attention to news than cryptocurrencies? Aaron took a small step back. Why didn't you tell anyone, Violet? Why do it this way? Because no one had ever asked. I lifted my chin. How recently have any of you inquired about my true well-being? Mom's birthday was 2 years ago, as I recall. She requested me to move aside so she could snap a family portrait as I was standing at the party table. It didn't include me. Mom sagged into a chair like if the floor had been torn out from beneath her. Now what? Will the reunion still take place here? I slid the hotel folder in their direction and shook my head. For the family, I have the whole top floor of the Reverend's Hotel reserved. There are private rooms, a kids area, a barbecue deck, and even a gallery if you wish to display those old pictures. The room key and a calligraphy-style invitation were visible when Alex opened his letter. He took a deep gulp. How about you, Aaron inquired. Are you not coming? This is where I'll be staying. I'm getting ready to move and I have a job. Where will you be moving, Weekly? Mom asked International Vice President of Singapore. Beginning the following quarter, I will be in charge of the whole Asian market. I sipped my coffee. Do not be concerned. Even though I was never invited to the reunion, I will still send pictures in the same manner. For a few long seconds, nobody said anything. Mom rose up at last, her hand shaking over the key card. I apologize for not responding. Just gave a little nod. Aaron murmured softly. Violet, it was whatever else you did. You succeeded. We were all outdone by you. I gave a shrug. I don't have to be superior to anybody. All I wanted was to be considered a member of the family, anything that hasn't been done in 20 years. Without resentment, I escorted them to the door. They got into their automobiles and drove away from the house they thought was theirs, leaving in silence. With the last crisp sound of the lock moving into position, I shut the door behind them. I was just motionless with no sense of fulfillment. The type that results from being the last person standing after everything else has happened. Mom paused at the estate's door once more the following day as the sun slanted across the porch. However, she didn't bring an old key or baggage this time. She was holding a little wooden box securely. Sleepless and filled with too much regret to mention, her gaze sank in. I silently gazed at her as I opened the door. Her voice was scratchy as she added, I'm not here to ask for anything. I just believe you should keep something I have. She gave me the box, which was a battered oak case. Age had softened its edges, yet they were meticulously cleaned. I opened the lid. There were yellowed newspaper clippings with instantly recognizable headlines within. A record-breaking investment deal is led by a young CEO. Brooke Wells's ascent to prominence under 35 was fueled by a woman. My award-winning thesis, my MBA graduation invitation, and my academic transcripts were all included. I assumed you were unconcerned, I muttered. So did I. With her eyes fixed on the box, she answered. However, I made it a point to clip out your name whenever I saw it. You didn't need me, I told myself, that you had become too far away from me. I was worried that you would be successful without me. I carefully closed the lid. And out of pride, you haven't said anything for years. She gave a nod. Her hands began to well up with tears. I was mistaken. I don't need your forgiveness right now. I simply wanted to let you know that I have been following your every move. I didn't respond. Even if I was silent for too long, I just moved aside while keeping the door open. Enter coffee is available. I didn't see the self-assured person I'd known when she entered. The woman who used to sit at the head of every reunion table and command the room with a single glance was no longer she. She had lost her opportunity to fall in love at the proper moment and was now merely a mother attempting to reconstruct a broken memory. The gate reopened 3 hours later, right before the sun set. Trinity was the first to go. No heels, no makeup. She held a large book in her iced drink while sporting trousers and an oversized shirt. Do you still enjoy reading outside on your balcony? She tried to smile as she asked. I should bring tea, Nelson remarked. Nelson trailed behind, arms stuffed with his laptop and a file folder. When he saw me standing between our mother and elder sister, he appeared embarrassed, almost awkward, but nobody glanced away. We know that one afternoon won't make up for 10 years of neglect, so we're not here to apologize, Trinity explained quietly but plainly. Nelson said, I've signed up for an online course on business management. I'm starting afresh, not to boast. I want your advice if you don't mind. I froze in there, gazing at the two individuals who had represented the favoritism. I didn't. They were there in front of me now, their eyes and their words genuine. I said softly, Things don't change overnight. But at least we're listening to each other today. Trinity gave a nod. I'm on a 3-month leave of absence from the legal practice. If you don't mind, I'd want to take a plane to Singapore to see you. I was shocked that I didn't give you instructions. Just because you're my sister, she said hastily, because I don't want to look back and realize I missed my chance. I took a chair out. Take a seat. It's becoming chilly in your tea. The four of us sat there as the sun fell, bathing the water in a rich orange glow. Individuals who have previously lost one another, speaking now with a genuine wish to re-establish a connection alongside me, rather than with blame. Something changed. The start of acceptance, but not quite forgiveness. And sometimes that has greater force than retaliation of any kind. I had almost everything prepared for my early Monday AM trip to Hong Kong, documents for the meeting of the Asian Executive Board. A bag containing caution and optimism, and the keys to a high-rise apartment with a view of Victoria Harbor. However, my mother showed up at the door once again on a Sunday afternoon while I was organizing things in my former workplace. Her hands were empty, her face contemplative. "Have you got a moment?" she inquired. Like the final rays of sunshine, her voice was kind. I gave a nod. "Enter." As she saw me shut off my laptop, she took a seat. "I'd like to start again from the beginning on your terms, but I don't expect you to forgive me straight now." Unexpectedly, my heart softened as I gazed up at her. "Then pay close attention," I added gently. "No more showing preference, no more background-only dinners for me. Respect and listening are the first steps in repairing this connection." She gave a nod. "No justifications, no defense. I'll make an effort to learn that Aaron visited this time by himself that evening." She had a folded map of Hong Kong that was dotted with tourist attractions. With a bashful look, she said, "Not to control you. You previously expressed a desire to see the world. All I wanted to do was help. If I could." I remembered all those years spent in the shadow of the ideal older sister. As I gazed at her, Aaron's eyes, however, no longer questioned. They extended a sincere and patient invitation. "You are welcome to come," I said, "as long as you arrive as a sister rather than a manager." She chuckled. "A true sister, is that acceptable?" He gave a nod. For the first time in years, the entire family gathered at the Monterey estate for a casual dinner that evening. Nobody stood up to be heard. "Let Nelson talk, Mom." He gave a startup proposal that was supported by appropriate market research this time. "Just so you know, I'm not requesting that you pay for it." Half joking, he held out his hands. "However, could you review the draft if you have time?" I took my iPad out. "Forward. The proposal to me, I'll respond to you seriously, if you're sincere." He grinned with obvious relief. After supper, I took a glass of water outside onto the balcony. I was reminded that the world was waiting by the lights from faraway homes reflecting on the ocean. Mom came along. "Do you honestly think you can move that far?" I looked over at her. "Since I'm going this time, I'm all right." As someone who was selected rather than abandoned? After a few period of silence, she inquired quietly, "What about this house?" I gave a soft grin. "Seasonally, I'll rent it out. However, I'm willing to set aside a summer day every year for a reunion, if the entire family makes a sincere effort." She seems taken aback. "Really?" I firmly added one criterion. Somebody else hosts every year. Everyone makes a contribution. Don't come merely to snap pictures for social media." She chuckled, glimmering tears. "After that, I suppose I'll have to start baking from scratch again." I turned to face the home, the one who once made me feel insignificant and unwelcome, now filled with genuine laughter and pleasant light. As the cab took me down the winding road away from the estate, the following morning I noticed Mom putting up a little sign that said, "Good luck, Violet," and Aaron and Nelson waving from the porch. With misty eyes, I grinned. This time not out of grief. I entered a new chapter when the jet departed California. However, I wasn't going to flee the past this time. I was going in order to live my life as I saw fit, and to make room for others who genuinely wanted to enter Hong Kong's early sky was very different from California's no gentle sea wind, no pine tree fragrance. Rather, it infused a city that never paused, where every light reflected aspiration with a sense of urgency and vitality. I was standing by my new apartment's window, sipping a hot cup of tea while gazing out over Victoria Harbor's glistening waters. This was not an escape. This was a choice. The end of one chapter and the beginning of another in which I was the penman. For many years, I thought that the only way to respond to rejection was to succeed, that they would have to look up and feel remorse if I ascended high enough and stood far enough. But then I got everything: a global title, an apartment worth millions of dollars. Finance magazine covers with my name on them. I understood retaliation just served to keep me in the past. They had constructed. In all honesty, I didn't need them to know that I had succeeded. I needed to think. I was valuable. Around midday, Nelson sent an email. Subject: challenge for the first week. He included a brief message and a fresh business idea. This time I wrote it because I genuinely want to learn, not to show anything. "I appreciate you giving me this opportunity." I emailed it back with one sentence after grinning and making a few adjustments. "There's always time to start over. If you mean it." Aaron contacted her that afternoon from New York, where she was enrolled in a brief leadership course. "Next month I'll be in Hong Kong," she remarked. "I'm eager to learn how to be a better sister, not to impart any knowledge." Another message appeared after I hung up. A picture, Mom. Now the treasure box is tucked away next to a fresh family photo on the family altar. The handwritten note read beneath the frame, "You don't need to be flawless to be loved in a family." My eyes stung, but I didn't weep. Throughout my youth, I had yearned for my mother's approval, my father's acknowledgement, my brother's pat on the back, or just a quick check-in with my sister. However, I learned from growing up that family is more than simply where you were born. You are appreciated, heard, and free to be who you are there for the first time or the second. Standing atop a mountain and watching others bow is not what true success is all about. It's persevering through life. I could forgive you if you stormed without losing yourself to appease others. Peace was something I earned, not anything they did. And because I was strong enough to provide clear circumstances rather than because I was weak, I opened the door once more. Anyone who wishes to follow in my footsteps must be sincere in their intentions. No inherited norms, no outdated hierarchies. At the Kowloon headquarters, a young reporter hurried up as soon as I got off the shuttle. "I have a reporter. Could you tell me about your biggest achievement, Miss Violet?" I stopped, turned to face her, and realized that as long as I don't lose myself, I don't have to defeat anyone, she laughed after blinking. "That's the headline for tomorrow." With a simple shrug, it entered the glass tower, which reflected the deep blue sky above. Violet's experience serves as evidence that genuine value is independent of other people's opinions. It results from having the courage to live a genuine life. You don't succeed to get even. It's for recovery and taking back your position in this world. Family must adapt, respect, and walk by your side if it wishes to be referred to as such. Particularly when you're powerful, not only when you're weak, and sometimes the best way to build a real home is to learn to stand alone. How do you feel about Violet's path and the changes in her family? Please share your opinions in the comments section below, and remember to subscribe to the channel for more touching, inspirational tales of development, family, and life.